of persuasion. So in our last class, I gave you a piece of paper, and this was just from the chapter of our book, the Informative and Persuasive chapter, which had different fallacies within it. So just as pulling out some information from you, what are fallacies in persuasive arguments? How would you define that?
Isn't that like a way to persuade someone, kind of?
It is.
Like the method that you're using?
It's a way to persuade somebody, but there's something wrong with it. So, and that's what we're going to be focusing on. And we usually have this gut reaction. We know when somebody's presenting an argument to us, when somebody's not quite
Misleading.
right. Misleading is one of the things. Misinformation is another thing. Distorting information. These are all issues that happen in our world today. So fallacies is not what we're going to be learning, and they can be very unethical. And we have to be careful because this class, my job isn't to tell you what to think, but to give you the tools so that you can make decisions on your own. Unfortunately, there are people in this world that are very comfortable manipulating information and people around them so that they do things, spend money, vote for people, buy products that you probably wouldn't have if these fallacies weren't in place. And people are very comfortable doing that in our culture. And the thing is I can't stop that, and you can't stop it from happening. But we can learn the tools to identify it. So whatever we do in the world, we are making the decisions ourselves. It's what we know is right for us with everything we know in our worlds around us. So that's the point of this type of a class, so we can identify it. I can't stop what goes on in the world, and neither can you. But we can understand when there's flawed reasoning. The other thing, it can be kind of funny. There's some really funny commercials out there that we know full well are just entertainment, and an example would be the Geico commercials. Those are so funny and silly to watch that, we know that it's kind of an entertainment for us. They still want us to buy their insurance. We know that point. Now, the other point of this, when we're looking at our own arguments, we have positions on our arguments. And there are people that will argue for our position and will use unethical ways to do it. And this doesn't help. This doesn't help the cause. So you're going to have to probably see some uncomfortable things as you move through life where you're like, gosh, I just wish that they would just present it in a different way, because I actually agree with them. Now, let's say it's a political candidate, okay, and they're using a lot of fallacies. Okay, you can still vote for that person, but know that they're using fallacies. Okay, it's tough. Sometimes we have to make some tough decisions. So now that we know what fallacies are, your book has some listed fallacies, but what I want to do is just introduce you to the different names of fallacies that can come up. There's so many more names to fallacies. There's so many different types of fallacies. So if you've taken a philosophy class, they usually really focus on fallacies. I think sociology does too. Has anybody been introduced to these topics? Okay, so we have some familiarity within the class already. So that clock is going to make me think we have an hour extra in here. So as we look yeah, we're just about ready to start class. So as we look at these very common types of fallacies, false or misplaced authority means that somebody may be, say, backing up something, saying something is great, but they really don't have the authority to say that. So we see this with celebrities a lot. Or the illusion of authority is another issue. So an actor can have like a lab coat on and say, I prescribe this to all my patients. Okay? And so it can create an illusion of authority. Very, very common. We use this a lot with Olympic athletes, the sponsorships, or athletes in general, the sponsorships. Think about what they're sponsoring. Michael Phelps, for example. Okay. He's an amazing athlete. Now, if you think about what he sponsors, are they really related? It's a false sense of authority that if I start wearing Under Armour, I'm going to be just this amazing swimmer. Okay, it doesn't work that way. So false authority many times is linked up with a false cause. So cause and effect, we know what cause and effect is, but cause and effect are unrelated. So if we go into, let's say, we're not going to put this up with false authority, but let's just say that you did really well on a test, and you're like, I know why I did really well, because when I got up, the sun was shining. Put me in a good mood. That's the reason why I did well on that test. Okay, what's a better reason? What's a more likely reason that you did well on the test? Yeah, you were ready for it. You knew the material. You studied. So those are some things. It's just like what it wasn't because the sun was out. It was nice that the sun was out, but that's not the reason why. There's a kind of a well-known study that is dropped in a lot of statistic books. So if you have exposure to this, bear with me. But the other another example was that on warm days on beach cities, there was more crime. No, it wasn't crime. It was ice cream sales, more ice cream sales. Okay, more ice cream sales equated to more crime. So they linked those two up. And they were saying, they were trying to say this was a cause and effect. Okay, so our gut reaction should show us that those two do not link up. How many of you have heard that study? No? Oh gosh, they had this in my statistics books. They're like, so what's the reason then? What's going on? Okay, if we were to look at how crime might be more prevalent, what are some reasons that crime might be more prevalent?
It's a nice day, it's summer.
Okay. Which
People are more apt to get out.
okay, yeah, that was what the cause and effect actually was. It just so happened that there were also some higher ice cream sales because the cause and effect was the nice weather as well. So they use that as an example in statistics books about how we can really, really get off base. So what are some other cause and effects that you might see in your topics? Cause and effects that might be false in certain arguments. Can you poke holes in other arguments? This is a great way to think of persuasion. Okay, think about it. As we move through here, this is really common, unfortunately. The personal attack, the ad hominem, means that it's just name calling, saying mean things to other people. So you're getting off track, somebody's losing ground in, let's say, a debate. So it seems a lot easier just to sling an insult to the person, which really has nothing to do with what you're talking about. But the problem is we have an emotional reaction to that. So when somebody insults you, what do? Yeah, yeah. Okay, or shut down, one of the two. How many of you are fighters and you want to get them back somehow? So you're just gonna, okay, all right, so we got a lot of fighters in here. How How many of you shut down? The fight or flight. The shut down? Okay, a few of us shut down as well. So, and neither of those work very well with personal attacks, because what happens? You're no longer on the topic. So this is very difficult to overcome because of our emotional reactions. One of the best things we can do is get a hold of our emotions and realize why this person is creating a personal attack. And it's probably because they are losing ground on the argument or the debate. So they're losing it. And that's one way for them to try and gain ground. It's a dirty trick. We all know it's a dirty trick. And it happens a lot. It's really hard to get away from. This, actually, if I come here, I'm going to move down to red herring because this may be a part of this. So for those of you that raised your hand that have some exposure to fallacies, what is a red herring? Does anybody recognize that term? You do?
Yeah, we will in critical thinking,
No, good class.
yeah.
Okay,
But I'm not for sure. Is it like the thought of truth, but it leads to not truth? I don't know.
Isn't that something where they like try to distract what's the
That-
real thing?
yes, it's a distraction. It's what we call a rabbit trail. So you were getting there with your explanation. So yes, it's a distraction, which this is a distraction too. So this can be a part of a red herring. Now in a red herring itself, there can be all kinds of different distractions. But a personal attack is one way to throw in a red herring. And the next thing you know, you're talking about something else that has nothing to do with the topic. That's the point for the other person in the argument. But you can do other things with red herrings. For example, this is for those of you that have taken any classes in taking like relational things. This is something that will come up. It's like, don't bring up other issues when you're in an argument. Okay, that creates a red herring. So you may be talking about one thing, something else gets you mad or gets the other person mad, they bring it up, you're no longer talking about that thing. It's another rabbit trail that we go on. It's a red herring. So it distracts us from what we're talking about. And it'd be saying, yeah, I know you're upset that tuition's going to triple in price, but if you really want to get mad, think about how much you pay for books. Okay, it's the publisher's fault. Okay, now that's still a problem, but that's not the problem we're talking about. So I've effectively distracted you from what we're supposed to be talking about. So I can throw in another issue that you may feel strongly about, unrelated, then I'm no longer the focus of this thing. So red herrings are tricky because it tries to unfocus us. Does anybody know where the word red herring came from? Why that was a term that they used? It's kind of an interesting history. So it used to be when they would train dogs to hunt fox, and they would take red herrings, which is a pickled fish, and they would drag the scent of the fish all over the fields, and that was the red herring for the dog. So if the dogs couldn't stay on the scent of the fox, they weren't as good hunters as those that got distracted with the red herring. So it's just sort of an interesting backside story here. Fact versus opinion. This one is really tough. This is another emotional thing, so it kind of captures us. So there's a name called a demagogue. You may have heard it usually in like a political debate. Somebody will say, "Oh, you're a demagogue." But what's happening is an individual is a very good public speaker, typically, highly emotional, maybe only mentioning a story of one, but no sources that are good, or maybe no sources altogether. So it becomes an opinion rather than a fact, but it's presented in a way. So one of my students found an article in my online class, and it just demonstrated about how this individual took these quotes from other places and then slid their opinion within there and just kind of skewed the whole thing. So that's an example of fact versus opinion. So it doesn't have to necessarily be public speaking. It can be in articles as well. These are typically charged, highly emotional. If you find yourself saying, I can't believe this is happening, or this is too good to be true, then you may want to check that a little bit deeper. What are those sources like? There are sources. Conspiracy theories can run into this too. This is pretty popular here. Okay, who knows what straw man is? Straw man fallacy. This is another tricky one. You know it. You know them all. I know you should. Does anybody else know straw man? Do you know? Oh, no. I can't. You did like a look. Okay, this one's, it's worth mentioning because it's a very tricky kind of fallacy and it's hard to maneuver this, but it's important for you to see it. It's, let's say that you have an argument and it's good. So I repeat this argument, but it's not quite your argument. It's something that's weak and it's something easy for me to push over. Say, you just said this, and you'll be, say, no, that's not what I said. This is not what I said. That's what a straw man is. It's taking what somebody else says and changing it, saying that they said that. And then it makes your argument look stronger, and that creates an emotional reaction as well. So straw man is a very tricky fallacy. Okay, we know what bandwagon is. What is the big deal if we all do something? We all jump on the bandwagon and do something that's what everybody's doing. I should ask you, do you know what the bandwagon is? I'm assuming. Okay, all right, so everybody's doing it. You should do this too. Why is
There's
that?
like no individualism in that. There's
Okay.
no, I mean, you're just following the mass.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a whole psychology behind this type of group think. The mob effect. What's the mob effect? Just tie it right in there. The Lucifer effect. What's happening is that there can be great amounts of people that aren't doing the right thing. If you look historically, this is common. I mean, geez, look at Hitler. You know, that is a type of bandwagon. Well, that is bandwagon right there. So there are things that we have jumped on before in societies that haven't been right. If anybody's knows a little bit more about Einstein, he was when he was in Germany when Hitler was in power. He wrote about how he couldn't understand how everybody around him was just moving along in this direction when it was so wrong. So it was kind of fascinating to see that he was not jumping on this bandwagon. Now, hasty generalization is making assumptions too quickly. Okay, so we can kind of tell that that's what it is. It can be a real big problem depending on what it is for one. So the story of one, this is another story of one, doesn't represent everything. And so if you were thinking like of a detective that's collecting evidence for a crime scene, there could be a lot of pressure to come up with some type of conclusion. But unless he or she is careful, then they can jump into a hasty generalization and make a big error. So collecting enough information to have what's called an appropriate inference is important. Okay, moving forward, post hoc, some of these can be like superstition. If you don't do this, bad things will happen. You see this in a lot of those chain social media notes. copy and paste this entire thing into your, you know, and it's your mother, and you think you probably should, because she might get mad at you. But really, it's okay, you don't have to. Bad things won't happen, just like opening up an umbrella inside, you know, that's not gonna cause issues. Just ask Jake over here.
I will. Don't open the umbrella.
Okay, so he's gonna dispute me on this, but I still think it's okay. So as we move on, the either or, this is another really high pressure. Think of a high pressure salesperson. I know you've been in this situation. The moment you leave this office and my manager comes back, this deal is off the table, you have to take action now. So if you've been in that high pressure situation, you've been in an either or. So it's basically saying there's no other option available. There's no other solution. You know, either you give to this charity or all these kids are gonna die. You know, so it's really up to you. Do you wanna see them die? You know, it's that kind of, that pressure that's unfair manipulation. So moving almost there, slippery slope just means that if one bad thing happens, you can expect the end to happen soon. So one bad thing happening means one bad thing happened. It doesn't mean it's the beginning of the end. So we have to be careful, especially in politics is a place that we may look at. So you may have some things that you have to address, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the end of all or total destruction. And then the last one that I'll mention, there's so many more, but the last one that I'll mention is saying that since we've done this before, this is the way we should do it again. So it's not the opportunity for change or improvement. The appeal to tradition, this is the way we've always done it. Other things don't work, end of story. So that's a tough one also to overcome, especially when somebody else is in charge. So that's a fallacy right there. Okay, there's a lot more than that, but let's look at a couple of examples. Okay, this is, does anybody know what this is?
Space shuttle that exploded.
Okay. Do you know which one it was?
The name of it is one of the teacher, isn't it?
Right, the Challenger.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I was in elementary.
Yep.
We watched it on TV.
Yeah, so we had, I was in 8th grade, and this was, yeah, monitors up and everything, and the teacher was on it. That was so disappointing, you know, all these little kids, you know, watching this, and the thing is, they knew it was gonna happen. They knew that the shuttle, that there was big issues here. And so this was actually shut down because it was gonna be a cold morning, and they had what's called an O-ring that sealed certain things up. And the O-ring was not tested for certain temperatures, but on the preliminary testing, it had failed for certain temperatures. And so they were saying, no, we can't fly this. We don't think this O-ring's gonna hold up because it's had some failures in this area. And this was the response from management. We've flown the shuttle 19 times. Okay, appeal to tradition. Major groupthink and a lot of pressure. So this ended up to be, of course, a huge investigation. And this is another one you'll find in case study after case study, just seeing how a group, bandwagon, can really go down the wrong road. Now this one's kind of a fun example. Proactive. What is proactive? Acting. Okay. All right, so let's look at the individuals here. Now, I have to say that not everybody knew who she was. Do we know who she is? Okay, all right. All right, so do we know who he is? The Maroon 5 singer. So it's interesting, and I'm not going to tell you what the fallacies are, but what do you think the fallacies are? False authority. Why is it false authority?
Just because they're celebrities, we should really.
Okay. Okay, that's very good. So there's one. Anything else?
Chances are they had clear skin before this ad.
Okay, very, very good. So we're just gonna go back a couple more here. So we're looking at questionable cause. We're definitely looking at false or misplaced authority. There are a couple other things that are going on. Because when we look at Adam Levine, how old is he?
42, probably.
Okay, so when they show the picture of him with acne, how old do you think he is there?
12.
Yeah, so there should be this gut reaction that something doesn't seem right here. So it's not likely that, and I don't even think Proactive was around when he was a teen. I'm not sure how long they've been around, but I don't remember them being around except more recently. So there's all kinds of fallacies going on here. If you watch the commercials, there's a lot more that come up in the commercials. So now with your groups, I want you to consider what kind of fallacies are used in your topics. So if you have one of those topics where it may be the more highly controversial one, I want you to bring that out in your group, because this is going to help you as you develop argument strategies. Write them down, and then if you think of something else, write it down too. So it could be argument for or against your topic.